Hi, I have a really great job. I spend a lot of time looking at piles of rubbish and other random stuff. And another big part of my job is working with regular people so that they too can learn to love this stuff. I'm talking about this sort of thing. We haven't got my thing up, that's me. Okay. This is one of many piles of rubbish. There's a pile of rubbish for every occasion, I'd suggest to you. This one, the artist made lots of these. I reckon if you went on eBay, you might be able to get yourself one. Very what do you say about this? Diamonds are a girl's best friend. This one, if you were in a gallery, would you resist temptation or pick a sweet, take a sweet? Particular favourite, I'm just really intrigued with this work because you can't see how the shark's supported. So if anybody can find that out, I'd be interested to know. Nothing's off limits. Even really the impossible thing becomes possible. There's a few bodily functions. They really love bodily functions, contemporary artists. Is this cute or really a bit it's creepy, really? To see this one in its full glory, you're invited to go to Mona. They own it, and it's glorious. And this one, this is actually not the original of this one, because the original, somebody flicked the switch and turned the cooler off. So what is wrong with this stuff? What's wrong with contemporary art? A lot of people think that it's just out to shock and to really, it's a bit of a con trick, and it's just an elitist game that people in the arty-farty world play. But I don't think it's works like that. To me, I think the trouble with contemporary art is that we think about it and it kind of makes sense that it should be a visual experience, but actually it's got much more to do with listening. But before I go there, why should we bother looking at this sort of art? Well, the art industry is pretty massive. People are going to art museums in droves, and art museums are popping up all over the place. And I get a sense that if Mona hadn't been born, hadn't been built, then the Tasmanian economy would be a bit of a basket case. But I think, despite the fact that there is this kind of huge upsurge in interest in art museums, that a lot of people really haven't got a way into it. That they might like going, but do they actually stop and look at many artworks? And how much time do they spend actually looking? There's a statistic I got, and that says that it was looking at an exhibition by a couple of the most controversial British artists, Damien Hirst and Tracey Emin, and they discovered that the average time people spend looking, if they bother to look at all, is less than 5 seconds. I had a pivotal experience about 20 years ago. I was running an art gallery, and one day a man put his head in at the door and, looking at me through a quite fantastic, intricate and beautiful installation that more or less filled the whole space, he said, "Excuse me, I thought this was an art gallery." That he was actually looking for art, but he couldn't see it even though it was right in front of him, was really baffling to me. But on reflection, I thought that the artwork, or he had expectations about art, and this artwork wasn't meeting those expectations. When did this all happen? When did it start? When did art really go off the rails? I think that was really about half a century ago. In the 1960s, there was this kind of groundswell of argument, and things were looked at inside out and back to front and scrutinised. There was this time that generated feminism, civil rights, the environmental movement, the youth revolution, grey power, and upheavals in education. All sorts of things were tossed about. And that situation hasn't finished yet. We're still in a period where we're looking for inclusion and acceptance of difference. So the battle goes on. Art too has entered that space. It has things that it really wants the world to hear. The trouble is, the world's not always listening, and there are serious consequences for not listening. Now, I learnt about this listening thing when I did a course in parent effectiveness. When my daughter was young, she was really angry and aggressive for reasons I could not understand. The parent training taught me to listen. So instead of demanding she be nice or trying to cheer her up or ignoring it and hoping it would go away, none of course which worked, none worked, none of those solutions, but in fact made it worse. The parent training taught me to listen to what her behaviour was telling me. And with a bit of practice and a fair amount of patience, it actually worked. So it might sound a bit crazy, but I think there's a relationship between how you look at contemporary art and how that listening works with being a good parent. I think that the artwork behaves a bit like a child who is not being heard, or an adult is misunderstood for that matter. And viewers behave a bit like that confused parent, especially when they kind of shout back at the artwork or storm off in a huff, muttering under their breath about how hopeless artists are. I think that if we could just listen to the artwork, perhaps that aggression would de-escalate, as it does in child care and child listening, and maybe the way into the artwork might become possible. Here's an example of what I mean. I think that's where I'm at. So how do we start listening, actually, to contemporary art? Firstly, what is art really supposed to do? What's good behaviour in art? Well, I think it's things like really well-executed representations of realistic things, or beautiful expressions of profound emotions, or perhaps even well-balanced arrangements of lines and forms and colours. The thing is, contemporary art messes up with these things. It doesn't do that. And that's an issue. When in my work, I often hear people say things like, "It's not well made. My 6-year-old could do better than that. She hasn't even made it herself. Where's the skill in that?" Or it's messy, or it's unfinished, or it's too ordinary, or it smells. I actually heard that one today. The thing is, all these judgments are right. The viewers actually get to the heart of the matter with almost no effort at all. It's what they do next, though, that makes all the difference. If that judgment is just the end of it, and that's their last word, well, go home. But it doesn't have to be that way. Here's an example of what I mean. A few years ago, a 52-year-old artist tried to destroy Martin Creed's work that won the Turner Prize in England. The prize was called "The Lights Going On and Off," and it was literally that, a room in the gallery with the lights switched on and off at 5-second intervals. This woman was absolutely livid that this work had won. She thought it was an affront to proper artists with real talent. And then she went on to say something really interesting to me. She said, "At worst, this is an electrical work. At best, it's philosophy." Well, yes, it is philosophy. She got it right. She got to the nub of the work. The thing is that rather than engage with that philosophical conversation that the work was offering her, she chose to throw eggs at it. This action, incidentally, really making it very clear that her philosophical preference was for aesthetic rather than for this kind of noisy philosophical art. Another work that's received really bad press is Tracey Emin's My Bed. For those of you who don't know it, this is a bed that reputedly the artist Tracey Emin slept in for a couple of weeks, and she wasn't on her own, I don't think. And it's the detritus from that experience. So round the bed there are empty bottles and tissues and used and underwear and cigarette butts, and it's, yeah, you get the drift, really. Okay, I work often with people who don't have an art background, they're not trained in art, and I often ask them what they think about this work. Well, they're pretty quick to say that it's all pretty wrong and empty and weird and disgusting and dirty. And they say things like, it's too ordinary, it's far too familiar. It reminds me of my daughter's room, and if this is great art, then my daughter's a great artist. When I go on to ask them what's right about the work, they say things, they don't see a lot, but they do say things like, it's a plain and simple bed and its sheets are white. And that's kind of a description of a blank canvas. For me, when I see this work, I see the square bed and the white sheets, and I'm reminded of Malevich's White on White, perhaps one of the most extreme examples of high modernism that there is, but that's just me. Either way, we have a canvas that's had a bucket load of life thrown on it. Some people, though, just want to tidy it up. But in their listening to their judgment, sometimes they kind of get to see their own obsession with neatness that can sometimes get in the way of real living. So we all bring our own baggage to this process, so each conversation, each relationship to the artwork will be different. For those who see the blank canvas, they might be engaged in a conversation or a question of something like, what's the relationship between life and art? For me, it's something like, where is the real life in modernism? And for those obsessive tidiers, perhaps something like, where is the real life in my life? And is it worth ruining the relationship with my child over a messy room? And I think these are really interesting and profound ideas and conversations that are worth having. So I think what's really fantastic about contemporary art is that if we listen carefully to its bad behaviour, we have a chance to kind of meet and counter our fears, our disappointments, our prejudices, things we haven't thought through before, including really interesting stuff. As Socrates said, a life unexamined is not worth living. And that goes for the bits that aren't going as well as we'd like. Because isn't it in the things that are going a bit belly up, that's when we do our real learning. And it's the same with contemporary art. It's the things that are a bit odd or off in some way that are the keys into the meaning of the works. So I think the process for looking at contemporary art goes like this. 1, decide to stop and listen to a work that at first glance you feel like it's pushing you away by its bad behaviour. Name up what it is that you don't like. Examine those don't likes. Where did they come from? Are they learned? Do they affect your behaviour? Do you really think this way? And then have a conversation in and around those don't likes and the things you discover. It's as simple as that. So what's wrong with contemporary art? What's wrong with contemporary art is in fact what's right about it. All we have to do is listen.